A woman runs for her life as a mad ant pursues her. When she is about to exit through a steel door, the mad ant appears in front of her. She turns back in fear, picks up a crowbar, and hides behind the trash. The mad ant enters, looking for her without knowing that she is behind him. She charges towards him, attempting to hit him. However, the man senses her and manages to stop her. He slaps her hard in the face, hangs her upside down using a meat hook, and brings her with him in that position. He throws her inside a furnace. In a fit of rage, the mad ant turns on the furnace, roasts her like a chicken, and shuts the door closed. 5 years ago, an old and rusty truck meandered through the fields where children played. In the front yard, 6-year-old Martin Bristol sat leisurely on a swing. Meanwhile, his mother, Catherine Bristol, engaged in a conversation with a babysitter regarding Martin's unique condition. She detailed that Martin's body doesn't register sensations of pain due to a condition called SI-PA, explaining the perilous consequences such as the potential to break bones without awareness or bite his tongue off unknowingly. Catherine meticulously instructed the babysitter to regularly check for cuts and bruises on Martin's legs, arms, and even inside his mouth. Unbeknownst to them, Martin became the unsuspecting victim of a stranger's deception outside. Following the discussions, they decided to venture outside for the babysitter to meet Martin. To Catherine's dismay, upon looking out through the window, Martin was nowhere to be found. Anxiety gripped her, prompting a frantic search outside, only to discover that Martin had been kidnapped by the stranger in his weathered truck. The man transported the boy to his gruesome abode, where he committed heinous acts, including the cruel fate of a woman with her hands restrained overhead. The man, armed with a selection of sharp knives, proceeded to inflict pain on Martin, emphasizing the lack of sensation. Subsequently, he turned his malevolence towards the chained woman, subjecting her to multiple stabbings as her screams echoed. Seizing a moment during a heavy rainstorm, Martin attempted to escape, but the man's swiftness thwarted his efforts. 5 years later, Allison Miller found herself stranded at a bus stop in a desolate location. Her uncle, Jonathan Miller, arrived in a white truck to rescue her. Jonathan warmly welcomed her and inquired about her memories of their house. Upon reaching Jonathan's home, his wife, Karen Miller, and daughter, Wendy Miller, greeted Allison with enthusiasm. Despite their earnest efforts to provide a warm reception, the palpable sadness on Allison's face remained evident. At the diner, Melissa, a waitress, completes her shift and prepares to leave. As she begins to reverse, a truck appears from behind, obstructing her path. Annoyed, Melissa confronts the mysterious man driving the truck. As she attempts to express her frustration, the man abruptly slaps her hard, causing her to fall. The man, involved in Martin's kidnapping years ago, reverts to his sinister habits, leading Melissa to the pig farm where he chains her hands, observed by a child peeking from behind a wooden prison. The next morning, Allison goes for a jog while Melissa continues to scream for help at the pig farm. A fellow prisoner advises her that resistance is futile. Meanwhile, a boy resembling Martin steals glances at Allison from an abandoned building. Though she briefly sees him, he vanishes and she resumes jogging until an encounter with an oncoming vehicle nearly hit by Optimus Prime. Falling and injuring her elbow, Allison is aided by a young man named Billy. Initially hesitant, she accepts his offer for a ride. During the journey, Billy learns about Allison's tragic past, having lost both parents and now living with her uncle, Jonathan. Observing them, Jonathan notices Allison's budding smile. Back at the pig farm, Graham Sutter, the murderer, arrives with Martin. Graham, wearing an apron, selects a knife to use on another captive. During the gruesome act, he speaks of a deer, suggesting he will amputate the woman's legs to prevent her from escaping. Meanwhile, Martin, disturbed by the brutality, attempts to flee but encounters a terrifying scarecrow set up by Graham. Startled, Martin is caught and placed back in an underground cage. As Graham prepares boiling water, a mysterious silhouette appears, prompting Graham to question the unexpected presence. The following day, while Jonathan drives Allison to school, they pass the Sutter plant, long shut down. Allison shares seeing a boy there, but Jonathan dismisses it as potential vandalism, cautioning her to jog on the main road and avoid Graham, living alone in the meatpacking plant. Jonathan drops her off, promising to pick her up at 2:30. Meanwhile, Graham changes Martin's clothes, engages in conversation about fear, redemption, and having Martin as a witness to his crimes. At the hardware store, Jonathan observes Billy purchasing bolts, unknowingly realizing that Billy is buying the wrong items. At school, Allison seeks a club of interest, but the only options are a cheerleading club and a soccer club, failing to capture her attention. Opting not to meet Jonathan in front of the school, she walks along the main road toward Billy's auto shop. During her walk, Graham appears behind her in his truck, but fortunately he passes by without incident. Arriving at the auto shop, Allison approaches Billy, who is engrossed in fixing a car. She pretends to walk away, prompting Billy to notice and stop her. The two express mutual feelings, and as Billy is about to invite Allison for a date, he's interrupted by his father's call. Rushing inside, Billy finds his father on the floor, and Allison assists him in getting him into his wheelchair. However, when introduced to Allison, Billy's father becomes rude upon learning she's from Chicago. In frustration, Allison leaves and walks, encountering the abandoned building again, intrigued by the boy she saw. While walking, she notices Graham standing at a distance, staring creepily. Meanwhile, at the pig farm, Melissa continues screaming and attempting to communicate with another woman who no longer responds. Graham enters with Martin, inflicting a wound on Martin's arm, eliciting fearful screams. Simultaneously, Allison returns home and faces reprimand for being late. She apologizes and promises not to repeat it. Back at the pig farm, Melissa pleads with Martin to help her. Graham, absorbed in writing in his diary and conversing with a cow skull, notices Melissa attempting to escape through a maze-like path. As she runs, Graham hears her screams, startled by a scarecrow. Despite outrunning him, she gets halted when Graham unexpectedly appears in front of her. Attempting to ambush Graham with a crowbar, she fails as Graham anticipates her attack, slapping her hard. Enraged, he hangs her leg on a meat hook, transporting her upside down toward the furnace. There, he roasts her like a pig. In his anger, he lashes out at Martin, choking him and declaring a lack of trust. The next day, while Allison is jogging in the main road, Billy passes by riding his car and offers her a ride. She accepts and goes inside the car. In the seat, she sees multiple medicines in which Billy tells her that it is for his headaches. At the fast food, the two eats and chats. Afterwards, the two hangs out in Billy's car and talks about deep things about their personal life. Billy shares that his father gets angry every time he hears Chicago because that is the very place where he loses the functions of his legs. While Allison shares how her mother and father died from an accident. Wanting comfort, the two suddenly makes out inside the car. Little do they know, a truck stops behind them. While they are making out, the man approaches towards them. The man appears to be Jonathan, who reprimands her and takes her back home. The two gets in a fight, but eventually they reconcile. At the pig farm, Graham captures another victim and chains her hanging. Graham orders Martin to hold the woman so he can stab her still. The blood from the woman splurts on Martin's face as Graham stabs her multiple times. While Graham is washing Martin's face, he sees a shadow of man and screams back at him, shouting that he is not afraid of him like a madman. The following day, Allison packs her things and decides to leave. Karen tries to stop her and tells her that she give Jonathan a chance. While talking, Allison tells her that she admires Billy's attitude in taking care of his father. She also adds that her mother died in pneumonia and does not want anything of it to happen. Hearing this, Karen tells her that Billy's mother did not die from pneumonia, instead she killed herself. That is why Karen is telling her that Billy and his father gets unstable from that. Allison then goes to Billy's house to sort things out. When she arrives, Billy displays frustration from last night and distances himself from her. Allison apologizes for what happened and tells him that she empathizes with him. She also adds that she already knows why he is taking pills and that is not for his headaches. Billy's father hears her and goes straight to them. He lashes out to them when he hears about his late wife. He shouts at them harsh words, making Allison walk out. While walking in tears, she sees Martin in the abandoned building and tries to reach him up. When she hears the truck, she hides and passes by when it is gone. Wanting to help the boy, she goes inside the building full of rusty tools and things. She goes deeper and deeper as she follows Martin, who runs away every time she is close to him. At the deepest room, she finds different sharp knives covered with blood. While venturing inside the abandoned building, Graham arrives. On the table, she sees a big notebook full of newspaper pages of missing people. Most of the people missing are women, but what catches her interest the most is Martin. He continues to follow her, but Martin refuses to come with her. Trying to get him join her, Graham appears from behind and captures her. He picks up a crowbar and hits her in the face. The morning comes and Allison is still not returning home. The couple gets anxious because she did not come home all night. Jonathan decides to go outside and searches for her, thinking that she might have spent the night in Billy's house. When he is about to go outside, he sees Billy coming to visit Allison. Jonathan then comes to realize that Allison is not in their house because Billy is also asking where she is. Jonathan bursts in anger and blames Billy. Anxious and angry, he drives his truck and tries to find Allison. Looking for her, Jonathan takes his chance of finding his niece in Sutter's plant. When Graham is about to stab Allison with a knife, Jonathan shouts, looking for her. Graham and Allison hears him, so Allison screams for help. Graham shuts her mouth by putting cloth and goes upstairs. Graham talks with him and asks him what he is looking for. Jonathan then tells her about his niece, but Graham tells him that he haven't seen her. Jonathan insists, suspecting that Graham might have something to do with Allison's disappearance. Suddenly, Graham pulls out his shotgun and shoots Jonathan in his abdomen. He checks on him and sees that he is lying dead. Graham comes back to Allison, and in anger, he puts her in a big fridge. Meanwhile, Billy starts to look for Allison as well by riding his bike. When he passes by the abandoned building, he sees Jonathan's truck parked. He enters in as well and calls out for Allison. When he gets deeper in the abandoned building, he finally sees Allison inside the big fridge. He rushes towards her and tries to open it, but he can't hear any word she says. He finds a metal and tries to break the chains locking Allison. While doing so, Graham sees him and sneaks behind him with a shovel in hand. Allison tries to tell him that Graham is behind him, but he can't hear a single word he says. He turns around too late and gets his head smashed multiple times. Graham proceeds to go to his office and starts to talk with the cow skull like a madman. He screams at it in anger and smashes the cow skull into pieces. However, when he looks back to the wall, the cow skull is hanging again on the wall. He proceeds to go in the kitchen where Martin is and shouts at him, justifying what he has done. He then proceeds to stab Martin on his hand, but Martin, having the condition of feeling no pain, shows no reaction. He then warns Martin not to do anything funny because he will be leaving for the meantime. Meanwhile, Allison gets a thin steel bar and finds a way to escape. She went upstairs and sees Martin at the table with a stab on his hand. She removes the knife and puts a cloth as bandage around Martin's hand. The two escape as Allison carries Martin. They see the scarecrow Graham designed to stop Martin from going out, so Allison kicks it to show him that it is nothing. At Jonathan's residence, Graham forcefully enters, attempting to capture Karen. A fierce struggle ensues as she fights to reach a knife, Wendy screaming in the background. In the midst of the fight for the knife, Karen instructs Wendy to retreat to her room and hide. Despite her efforts, Graham prevails, seizing the knife and stabbing her in the chest. Subsequently, he positions Jonathan's lifeless body beside her and initiates a blaze, consuming the house. Equipped with a butcher's knife, Graham ascends the stairs, breaching Wendy's room with the intent to kill. However, Wendy's plea to spare her dog triggers an unexpected emotional response in Graham. He becomes enamored with her and decides to take her as his new apprentice. Upon Allison and Martin's arrival, they discover Karen covered in blood. Urgently, Allison instructs Martin to save Wendy. Racing upstairs, Allison intervenes, stabbing Graham in the back and abdomen before departing. Descending to check on Martin, she encounters a blood-stained door handle, opens it, and is unexpectedly stabbed in the abdomen. Shocked, she realizes the assailant is not Graham but Martin. Collapsing to the floor, Martin continues stabbing her until she succumbs to her injuries. He ascends the stairs, locating Wendy, whose screams reverberate in the burning house. Injured, Graham manages to venture outside, clutching his abdomen. Upon his return, he engages in a macabre conversation with a corpse draped in curtains. As they converse, Martin emerges from behind and suffers a fatal blow from an axe. In the film's denouement, Martin assumes Graham's role, maintaining an innocent facade as he peeks outside the abandoned building, eagerly anticipating his next victim.